Imagine this: the wind howling through the sails, the ocean waves crashing against the hull, and a massive pirate fleet, the largest ever seen, cutting through the horizon. Led by the enigmatic and audacious Bartholomew Roberts, a man whose name struck fear into the hearts of the richest merchant traders, the pirate king who would become a legend. But what drove him? What made a man like Roberts capable of leading the most fearsome piracy operations in history? What did the world look like from his eyes? For decades, pirates were seen as nothing more than outlaws, marauders who lived outside the law, stealing what they could from the rich and the powerful. Yet, in the midst of this golden age of piracy, a new breed of pirate emerged, one who turned piracy into an organized, methodical force, a force that would disrupt the global trade system, challenge entire empires, and create a legacy that endures to this day. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, wasn't just any pirate. His story wasn't the tale of a rogue chasing gold and glory for his personal gain. No, Roberts turned piracy into an art form. He crafted a fleet so large and so feared that it challenged entire nations. Under his leadership, pirate ships would sail for months on end, disrupting trade routes across the globe, from the Caribbean to the coasts of West Africa. His fleet wasn't just a group of rogue pirates, it was a well-oiled machine, a system of pirates organized with a strict code, working together to plunder the riches of the New World. But how did Roberts do it? How did he transform the scattered, chaotic world of piracy into a cohesive, nearly unstoppable force? To understand Roberts is to understand the vast network of wealth, power, and danger that fueled piracy's golden age. The secret wasn't just his ability to raid merchant ships or his relentless pursuit of treasure. It was his incredible administrative genius. Roberts understood logistics better than any pirate captain before him. His fleet didn't rely on returning to port for resupply. It was a self-sustaining force that could last for months on the high seas. Roberts meticulously kept track of everything from ammunition to food supplies, allowing him to operate on the vast waters without needing to return to land. His meticulous planning and superior organizational skills made him not only a pirate king, but an unparalleled master of naval warfare. But his genius wasn't limited to logistics. Roberts also capitalized on the global trade networks of the time. In the vast and turbulent waters of the Indian Ocean, he found opportunities no one had considered before. Instead of raiding the traditional waters of the Caribbean, where Spanish treasure fleets were the most common targets, Roberts turned his eyes to the Indian Ocean, where the trade routes carried the riches of entire empires: gold, silk, spices, and precious stones. He turned piracy into a global business, attacking ships from the Mughal Empire, intercepting the wealth of entire nations. However, Roberts's most significant achievement wasn't just the expansion of piracy. It was the way he changed the very nature of it. Piracy wasn't a random series of attacks on ships. It became a coordinated effort, a systematic enterprise designed to exploit the weaknesses of colonial trade systems and the lack of effective naval power. The so-called pirate round, the route Roberts and his fleet carved through the Indian Ocean and beyond, wasn't just a sailing path. It was a strategic masterpiece, designed to strike at the heart of the wealthiest empires of the time, while remaining virtually untouchable by the navies of Europe. But what drove this man? Was it the promise of wealth, of riches beyond imagination? Or was there something deeper, something in Roberts that saw the pirate's life as a rejection of the rigid, oppressive systems of the empires he plundered? Was he a man seeking revenge, freedom, or simply the thrill of outsmarting the world's most powerful nations? Behind Roberts' ferocity and success lay a complex world of pirate codes, alliances, betrayals, and unimaginable wealth. The pirates who followed him weren't just scavengers, they were part of a revolution. They built alliances with local kingdoms, secured safe harbors on the fringes of the world, and lived by a code that, while outlawed, was still more just than the system they had escaped. Women like Bonny and Mary Read joined these ranks, fighting alongside men, living on their own terms, in a world where survival often meant choosing violence over subjugation. In the Caribbean, where colonial rule was still shaky and pirate havens flourished, pirates like Roberts controlled more than just the seas. They controlled economies, dictated terms of trade, and influenced the lives of millions. They were an undeniable force, shaping the world in ways history often overlooks. So how did a man like Roberts, with his towering intellect and ruthless leadership, rise from a humble background to become the most feared pirate in history? What were the pivotal moments that transformed him from a lowly pirate into a pirate king? And more importantly, what happened when his world finally collided with the overwhelming force of European empires determined to stamp out piracy once and for all? In today's episode, we will dive deep into the fascinating life of Bartholomew Roberts, uncover the mysteries of his remarkable rise, and explore how he and his fleet changed the course of maritime history. You won't want to miss this incredible journey into the heart of the Golden Age of Piracy. But before we set sail, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. Your support keeps us going, and by subscribing, you'll be the first to get more exciting and educational content like this. Now, let's uncover the mysteries behind the pirate king who ruled the seas. The mystery surrounding Roberts deepens when we consider his ability to forge a vast empire on the high seas. Unlike many pirates who relied on sheer luck or opportunism, Roberts engineered his success with meticulous precision. His rise wasn't driven by a single defining moment, but by a consistent set of actions and decisions that exemplified his brilliance as both a pirate and a leader. His success was, in many ways, a product of his intelligence and vision. It wasn't just about raids, it was about building an enduring pirate dynasty. But how did Roberts, a man with no royal title or noble lineage, manage to create such a powerful and far-reaching force? One of the key factors in Roberts's success was his ability to build a fleet that operated as a highly organized, disciplined, and efficient fighting unit. This was far beyond the random, chaotic nature of most pirate crews of the time. Roberts' fleet operated like a military organization, with clear objectives and a set of rules that governed the actions of every crew member. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Roberts enforced strict codes of behavior and discipline among his men. He believed in fairness and equality, even when it came to distributing the spoils of piracy. Roberts's leadership was not based on fear alone. He earned the loyalty of his crew by treating them with respect and making sure that every man had an equal stake in the outcome of their endeavors. His pirate code was a cornerstone of this model. Roberts' pirate code was a groundbreaking set of rules that laid the foundation for piracy to become a more structured, organized, and equitable enterprise. The pirate code governed everything from how rewards were divided to the expectations of behavior on board. Every pirate under Roberts' command was expected to follow this code strictly. Violations were met with punishment, and that punishment was often harsh. Despite the often brutal nature of piracy, Roberts saw himself and his crew as a self-sustaining community. Pirates who followed the code could be assured of fair treatment and an equal share of the plunder. However, it wasn't just the fairness of Roberts' leadership that earned him respect. It was his relentless ambition and strategic thinking. Roberts understood the economic implications of piracy, far more so than many of his contemporaries. He didn't just attack random merchant ships. He targeted ships that were valuable, strategically located, and part of larger, lucrative trade networks. His piracy wasn't just about taking what he could, it was about systematically attacking the backbone of European colonial economies. By choosing his targets carefully, Roberts made sure that each raid disrupted the colonial powers more than the last. The wealth that poured into his coffers was a direct result of his keen understanding of global trade systems. Bartholomew Roberts was not just a pirate, he was a pirate tactician. In the competitive and treacherous waters of the Caribbean and beyond, Roberts had to outthink his enemies at every turn. He knew how to use the elements of surprise and misdirection, setting traps and outmaneuvering the European fleets. He understood the value of intelligence, using local informants and spies to gain critical information about shipping lanes, cargo, and even the movements of colonial military forces. Roberts' ability to blend traditional pirate tactics with cutting-edge strategy made him a force to be reckoned with. Another key aspect of Roberts' operations was his innovative use of naval technology. Unlike many pirates who relied on small, fast ships that could evade larger naval vessels, Roberts made use of ships that were both fast and heavily armed. The Royal Fortune, his flagship, was a massive vessel, capable of taking on even the largest merchant convoys. But Roberts didn't just rely on the sheer size of his ships, he also capitalized on the tactical advantages that came with speed, agility, and firepower. Roberts understood that he needed to balance these elements to strike at the most opportune moments, and he did so with lethal effectiveness. Yet Roberts' mastery over tactics and strategy wasn't confined to just his fleet. His success also came from his ability to form alliances with local leaders, trading ports, and even other pirate crews. This network of allies allowed Roberts to create a web of support that stretched across the Caribbean and the West African coasts. In places like Madagascar, where pirate havens were established, Roberts was able to create strongholds where his crew could rest, resupply, and plan their next moves without fear of interference from European navies. It was through these alliances that Roberts was able to control the piracy operations in some of the most important maritime trade routes. But as Roberts's fame grew, so did the attention he attracted from European powers. While his success in piracy made him a legend among his men and among pirates, it also drew the attention of the English, French, and Spanish navies. His fleet's raids along the West African coast and in the Indian Ocean, areas far from traditional piracy centers, were seen as a threat to European dominance over global trade. Roberts's reputation spread far and wide, and soon the European powers were looking for a way to eliminate this rising threat to their imperial interests. By the early 1722s, Roberts had become a symbol of piracy's golden age, a time when pirates were no longer just petty criminals, but powerful figures who could influence world events. His influence extended beyond just his crew and his targets. Pirates, particularly those in the Caribbean and along the coasts of Africa, began to adopt some of Roberts' tactics and organizational methods. His pirate round became a blueprint for other pirate captains, and his disciplined approach to piracy helped create a new era of piracy, one where pirates operated as a cohesive force rather than as isolated bands of outlaws. However, as Roberts's power grew, so did the pressure from European empires to stop him. The British Navy, in particular, recognized the threat that Roberts posed to their commercial interests. Despite the vast distances between Europe and the pirate havens, the British Empire wasn't willing to let Roberts continue to undermine its economic systems. The stage was set for an inevitable clash between Roberts and the might of European naval power. And so, the question remains, what drove a man like Bartholomew Roberts to push forward despite the growing danger from all sides? Was it the power, the wealth, the endless pursuit of adventure, or something deeper? In the heart of this mystery lies the complex psyche of Roberts, a man who was both a brilliant strategist and a ruthless leader, a man whose ambition pushed him to the edges of the known world. The final chapter of Roberts' story comes with his eventual death, but his legacy would live on far beyond that moment. His transformation of piracy from a chaotic and disorganized pursuit into a sophisticated global enterprise reshaped the history of the high seas. Even after his death, the impact of his operations continued to reverberate through the pirate community, inspiring future generations of pirates to follow in his footsteps. In the end, Roberts's life is a story of revolution and rebellion, not just against the powerful empires of Europe, but against the idea of a rigid, hierarchical society that sought to control everything, from wealth to power. His story challenges the notion of what it means to be a leader, a man willing to defy the odds and forge a path of his own making. It's a tale of ambition, intellect, and an unyielding drive to create something far beyond what was ever imagined before. So, as we journey through the history of Bartholomew Roberts, one question will linger in your mind. What would it be like to live in a world where pirates ruled, where men like Roberts could command fleets, defy empires, and change the course of history with nothing but their wits and their will? Stay tuned as we uncover the story of the pirate king who took on the world and became a legend, a story that will not only captivate your imagination, but also leave you with a deeper understanding of the extraordinary forces that shaped the Golden Age of piracy. Bartholomew Roberts, the legendary pirate, was more than just an outlaw. He wasn't the typical image of a pirate that history often paints a rogue, driven only by the lust for gold and revenge. His story is one of exceptional foresight, meticulous planning, and strategic brilliance. What made him stand out among countless other pirates wasn't his ruthless ambition alone, but the system he built, the empire he forged, and the lasting legacy that he left behind. It wasn't just the vast wealth that he accumulated, or the fear he inspired in the hearts of merchant traders and European naval fleets alike. It was the way he transformed piracy from a chaotic, often haphazard pursuit into a well-organized force capable of rivaling entire empires. The question is not just how he achieved so much, but how his vision for piracy differed from that of his contemporaries. The answer lies not only in his tactical genius, but in his unwavering dedication to a singular, revolutionary idea. Piracy, like any enterprise, could be made into a business. And to do this, one had to think beyond simple pillaging. Roberts realized that in order for piracy to thrive, it needed to become more than just a series of random attacks on unsuspecting ships. It had to be methodical, sustainable, and above all, adaptable. At the time, piracy was viewed by most as a fragmented and erratic pursuit. Pirates were often lone wolves, preying on merchant ships without any long-term strategy, relying on luck rather than skill. While some pirates had managed to make a name for themselves through sheer violence and opportunism, they lacked cohesion. There was no collective effort, no coordination between ships, no organization. The pirate world was chaotic and uncontrolled. But Roberts, ever the visionary, saw beyond the scattered and chaotic nature of piracy. He envisioned a more controlled, systematic approach, and so he sought to transform piracy into a disciplined, organized enterprise. Roberts didn't simply gather a crew and set sail to raid merchant ships. He built something much larger, a pirate fleet, a fleet that operated as a cohesive unit, a machine of war on the high seas. And this fleet wasn't just any pirate fleet, it was one that was capable of taking on entire trade routes, disrupting entire global economies, and most importantly, doing so for extended periods of time. What made Roberts's pirate fleet so formidable was its sheer scale and efficiency. It wasn't just the number of ships at his disposal, but the way he managed them. He understood the value of logistics better than any pirate before him. His fleet was self-sustaining, able to stay out on the high seas for months, raiding and capturing ships without needing to return to port for resupply. He meticulously tracked everything from ammunition to food, ensuring that his crews never ran out of supplies, and his ships could operate effectively for long periods without any external assistance. This attention to detail, this extraordinary focus on the logistics of piracy, is what set Roberts apart from all other pirates. He understood that the success of a pirate fleet wasn't just about the size of the ships or the firepower on board. It was about the systems in place that allowed it to operate continuously, with precision, and without the need for constant resupply. This strategic foresight was what allowed Roberts to keep his fleet sailing through some of the most treacherous waters in the world, for months at a time, and without fear of running out of resources. Yet Roberts's brilliance wasn't limited to the practicalities of logistics. He also understood the larger picture, the political and economic realities of his time. Roberts was a master strategist, capable of understanding the complex international systems that governed the world's trade routes and the empires that controlled them. Where many pirates focused only on short-term gains, attacking ships for immediate profit, Roberts saw the bigger prize. He knew that if he targeted the most lucrative and strategically important trade routes, he could disrupt entire empires. For Roberts, piracy was not just about accumulating wealth. It was about striking at the heart of global commerce. The European colonial empires were built on the riches they extracted from their colonies, and the lifeblood of those empires was their trade routes. Roberts knew that to challenge these powers, to truly disrupt them, he would need to attack these vital arteries. It was his strategic understanding of global trade networks that allowed him to expand his reach far beyond the Caribbean, into the Indian Ocean and the coasts of West Africa. By targeting the Mughal Empire's trade routes, the riches of the East's silk, spices, precious stones, and vast quantities of gold and silver became his prize. In the Caribbean, the traditional pirate targets were the heavily laden Spanish treasure fleets. But Roberts didn't stop there. He realized that the wealth of entire empires, like the Mughal Empire in India, was carried along the trade routes between India and the Arabian Peninsula. The trade between these regions was immensely valuable, filled with treasure far greater than anything that could be found in the Spanish treasure ships. And it was here, on the Indian Ocean, that Roberts saw an opportunity that no one else had fully capitalized on. While many pirates of the time were content to raid the more predictable and familiar waters of the Caribbean, Roberts looked to the east, to the Indian Ocean, to the bustling trade between the Indian subcontinent and the Arabian Peninsula. This decision changed the very nature of piracy and cemented Roberts' legacy. This strategic thinking wasn't just a product of Roberts' ambition, it was a reflection of his deep understanding of the world's trade and the vast wealth at stake. He recognized that the Indian Ocean was a treasure trove of riches, and by targeting the trade routes that connected these empires, he could amass untold wealth and cripple the empire's economies. He understood that to succeed on the scale he envisioned, he would need to use not just his fleet, but his mind to outmaneuver his enemies. Roberts did not simply plunder and take. He made piracy an organized enterprise that strategically attacked the core of the global trade system. Roberts's vision extended beyond just the immediate spoils of piracy. He saw piracy as a political tool, an instrument that could be used to challenge the power dynamics of the colonial empires. For him, piracy wasn't just an individual act of greed, it was a collective, organized rebellion against the empires that controlled the world's wealth. His approach to piracy was a direct challenge to the very systems that sought to oppress and control the colonies. His fleet wasn't just a group of bandits, it was a force that had the power to rewrite the rules of the game. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Roberts' rise was his ability to maintain control over his fleet and ensure that it operated as a unified force. Roberts didn't rely on the traditional methods of pirate leadership, where the captain ruled with an iron fist, demanding submission and loyalty through fear. Instead, Roberts established a code of conduct, a pirate code that ensured that every member of his crew had a voice. The idea of equality on the high seas, where every pirate had an equal stake in the outcome of their raids, was revolutionary. It was a system that ensured fairness and loyalty, creating a cohesive and highly motivated crew. Roberts understood that in order for his fleet to succeed, he would need to maintain order and discipline. He knew that piracy, if it was to thrive, had to operate like a well-run business with structure, rules, and accountability. His pirate code, which governed everything from how the spoils were shared to how disputes were settled, created a sense of unity and purpose that bound his crew together. This was a pirate fleet that wasn't driven solely by greed, but by a shared sense of purpose and an understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. This sense of unity and purpose gave Roberts' fleet the cohesion it needed to become a true force to be reckoned with. But while Roberts may have been a brilliant strategist, an exceptional leader, and a master of logistics, his story was not without its challenges. The rise of Roberts was not without opposition, both from his pirate rivals and from the European powers that sought to eliminate him. The British, the Spanish, the French, all of them had their sights set on taking down Roberts and his fleet. And as his power grew, so did the danger that loomed over him. He had managed to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast many of his enemies. But the time would come when he would face forces too large to overcome. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming odds, Roberts refused to back down. His ambition, his genius, and his relentless drive to build his pirate empire remained unwavering until the very end. But what drove him? What was it that kept him pushing forward in the face of danger, uncertainty, and the constant threat of death? Was it the lure of wealth, the desire for power, or something deeper, a personal need to prove that he could conquer the impossible? Bartholomew Roberts' legacy is one that transcends piracy. It is a story of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of something greater. Roberts' rise was not just a victory for piracy, but a challenge to the established order. He showed the world that even the most oppressed and marginalized could rise up, organize, and create something far greater than themselves. And in doing so, he left a mark on history that would never be erased. Bartholomew Roberts' legacy, however, wasn't just about the wealth he amassed or the empires he defied. His story is one of human resilience, ingenuity, and the transformative power of leadership in the most chaotic and dangerous of environments. The Pirate King did more than challenge the existing order. He redefined what it meant to be a pirate in an era of uncertainty and violence. Roberts carved his name into history not by sheer force alone, but by creating something enduring, an organized system, a community where each individual, despite their criminal status, had a role to play, a stake in the success of the fleet. For Roberts, piracy was a form of rebellion against the structures that sought to control and oppress. The colonial powers of the day were built on exploitation, on draining resources from distant lands through slave labor, forced trade, and the sheer brutality of empire building. In the face of this, Roberts' fleet wasn't just a group of bandits. It was a challenge to the prevailing system. The pirates under his command, united under a shared vision, were not only stealing treasure, but asserting a form of defiance against an unjust world order. They were, in their own eyes, taking what had long been stolen from them by the powerful empires they disrupted. It was no longer about the gold or the plunder, it was about reclaiming power from those who had systematically taken it. Roberts' ability to forge and maintain such a force amidst the dangers of the high seas was a feat of leadership that even his enemies could not ignore. His fame spread far and wide, striking fear into the hearts of merchant traders across the globe, even reaching the offices of colonial governors who began to fear the impact of his operations. In fact, Roberts' ability to unite a diverse group of men, sailors, former slaves, deserters, and rebels is a testament to his strategic genius. He turned their desperation into loyalty and their discontent into purpose. He wasn't just a pirate captain, he was a unifier, a leader who saw the bigger picture and could inspire those around him to believe that they, too, could have a stake in a world that seemed so unfair. His fleet's triumphs in the Indian Ocean, the capture of vessels brimming with the riches of empires, were the fruits of his vision, a vision that saw beyond the simple act of piracy as a short-term venture. Roberts saw piracy as a long-term project, a revolution in motion, one that could evolve into something greater than what it appeared to be. Under his leadership, piracy became an organized rebellion, not simply an act of stealing, but a calculated disruption of the economic and political systems of his time. And in doing so, he created an empire of his own, a fleeting but undeniably powerful force that defied all expectations. While his reign may have been short-lived, his mark on history is undeniable. Bartholomew Roberts was not just a pirate, he was a force of nature, a man who took what was perceived as a chaotic and disorganized life of crime and turned it into an organized, structured rebellion against the colonial systems that defined the age. His story is not just one of fortune, but of profound significance in the broader narrative of resistance against oppression. As the age of piracy raged on, few figures left a mark as indelible as Bartholomew Roberts. The world knew him as Black Bart, the pirate king who led a fleet larger and more organized than any that had come before. His rise wasn't just about becoming the most feared pirate on the seas, it was about the empire he built, the systems he created, and the world-changing ideas he implemented. He was not merely a man with a thirst for wealth or adventure. Roberts embodied the spirit of rebellion and the genius of strategy. His understanding of the systems that governed the world, his ability to manipulate them, and the ruthless efficiency with which he carried out his plans make his story one that transcends the realm of piracy and enters the domain of revolutionary leadership. In Roberts' time, piracy was still largely a disorganized affair, with pirates operating independently, often without a coherent plan, seizing opportunities when they arose. The piracy of the Golden Age was marked by chaos, driven by personal ambition, and fragmented into individual acts of violence and theft. Pirates fought with one another for supremacy, and many sailed without any true sense of unity. But Roberts was different. His vision, his leadership, and his strategic brilliance saw piracy not as an isolated, sporadic venture, but as an enterprise, an organized, systematic force that could challenge entire empires. Roberts transformed the nature of piracy itself, turning it into a business, a collective pursuit that transcended personal greed, and instead focused on creating a sustainable, efficient system that could last. Under his command, piracy became more than just a series of raids. It was a fully functioning fleet with rules, structures, and long-term goals. The key to Robert's success lay in his extraordinary ability to organize and manage his pirate fleet. But what made Roberts a true innovator was his mastery of logistics and supply chains. Unlike previous pirate captains who would raid, plunder, and return to port for supplies, Roberts built a self-sustaining fleet. His ships could stay out on the high seas for months at a time, able to fight and capture ships without ever needing to return to port for resupply. Roberts understood that a pirate fleet's power didn't come from its cannons alone, but from its ability to operate efficiently and maintain itself far from land. He meticulously kept track of every aspect of the fleet's resources: food, ammunition, medical supplies, and even the condition of the ships. This extraordinary attention to detail allowed Roberts to pursue his targets for far longer than any other pirate fleet, striking fear into the hearts of merchant traders who suddenly realized that no ship was safe. But Roberts didn't just operate a fleet, he built a pirate empire. To do this, he understood that piracy was not about hitting the same familiar targets over and over again. He saw piracy as a business that could be expanded, refined, and made efficient. Roberts was always thinking ahead, understanding that to make piracy truly lucrative, the pirates had to be more strategic. So, he established trade routes and planned expeditions with precise foresight. Unlike most pirates who raided randomly, Roberts had a method. He targeted the wealthiest shipping lanes in the world, from the Caribbean to the coast of West Africa and beyond to the Indian Ocean. The scope of his empire was vast, but it was not just about numbers. What made Roberts' empire so effective was his ability to gather and control vast amounts of wealth through strategic raids, most notably by exploiting the Indian Ocean trade routes. At the time, the Indian Ocean was a prime location for the transportation of vast wealth, and Roberts was quick to realize that this was where the richest prizes lay. The Mughal Empire, one of the wealthiest powers in the world, transported unimaginable quantities of gold, silk, precious stones, and spices along the routes between India, Arabia, and Africa. Roberts understood that while the Caribbean offered rich rewards in terms of treasure fleets, the Indian Ocean offered the possibility of plundering entire empires, and it was here that Roberts made his mark. While other pirates focused on Spanish treasure fleets or ships carrying gold from the Americas, Roberts turned his attention to the Indian Ocean, where ships carrying goods worth millions passed through year after year. By targeting this trade route, Roberts ensured his dominance over the high seas, turning piracy into an enterprise capable of shaking the very foundations of global commerce. To the pirates who followed Roberts, this was no longer simply about personal fortune, it was about building an empire, one ship at a time. One of Roberts's key strategies was to employ intelligence networks that kept his fleet one step ahead of the authorities. While many pirates relied on luck, Roberts understood that intelligence was key to his success. His crew worked tirelessly, gathering information from all corners of the globe, building a network that allowed him to predict where the most valuable targets would be. This ability to gather information, to strike at the heart of the most lucrative trade routes, was a key reason why Roberts was able to carry out such successful and sustained operations. Every action, every raid, every capture was part of a larger plan to build his pirate empire. However, Roberts' vision wasn't limited to just his fleet's operations. He saw the value in alliances, not only with other pirates, but with local rulers who controlled key territories. Roberts was not just a ruthless pirate captain. He was a shrewd negotiator, using diplomacy and alliances to secure safe havens and strategic locations where his fleet could operate with impunity. In Madagascar, for example, Roberts struck deals with local African rulers, ensuring that his pirates would have access to safe ports and supplies. These alliances were not just about trade, they were about building a lasting infrastructure that could support piracy as a long-term venture. In exchange for protection and supplies, Roberts and his pirates offered goods and services that local rulers could not get from the European colonial powers. These mutually beneficial relationships helped Roberts maintain control over vast territories and provided him with the resources needed to keep his fleet running. This network of allies, ports, and safe havens formed the foundation of Roberts' empire, and it was key to the longevity and success of his operations. While other pirates relied on hit-and-run tactics, Roberts understood that to succeed on such a massive scale, he needed to create a sustainable infrastructure one that could operate independently of European colonial powers. By securing these safe havens, Roberts made his fleet nearly untouchable, and the European powers, despite their overwhelming military might, struggled to keep up with his increasingly sophisticated operations. But Roberts' brilliance didn't just stop at logistics, strategy, or alliances. What truly set him apart was his understanding of people. While many pirate leaders ruled with an iron fist, using fear and violence to control their crews, Roberts took a different approach. He implemented a pirate code that was revolutionary for its time. It wasn't just about looting and plundering, it was about creating a sense of unity and fairness among the crew. Roberts' code of conduct ensured that every member of his fleet had a voice and a say in the distribution of loot. Pirates had to adhere to strict rules, and violations of these rules could lead to severe punishments. This system, based on fairness and equality, helped maintain discipline and loyalty within the ranks. In fact, Roberts' ability to inspire loyalty among his crew was one of the reasons why his fleet was so successful. Pirates who served under him were motivated not just by greed, but by the sense that they were part of something larger, something that was built on shared values and purpose. His fleet was not simply a group of pirates, it was a team, an organized force with a shared goal. This sense of unity and purpose, combined with the discipline of the pirate code, ensured that Roberts' fleet operated with efficiency and cohesion. Roberts' leadership wasn't without challenges. As his success grew, so did the pressure to destroy him. The European powers that had long tolerated piracy were now determined to rid the seas of Roberts and his fleet. The British, the French, the Spanish, all of them saw Roberts as a direct threat to their empires and their control over the global trade system. Roberts was relentlessly pursued by the colonial navies, but even when the odds were stacked against him, he refused to back down. The world had never seen a pirate quite like him, and the empires that sought to destroy him underestimated his brilliance, his cunning, and his drive. Bartholomew Roberts' rise to power was a story of a man who took piracy to new heights, turning it into an organized, efficient, and systematic enterprise that challenged entire empires. His vision wasn't just about treasure, it was about rewriting the rules of the game. He created a pirate empire that had the power to rival the great colonial powers, and in doing so, he became more than just a pirate. He became a revolutionary, an innovator, and a leader whose legacy would never be forgotten. Bartholomew Roberts' legacy isn't merely defined by his exploits on the high seas, but by the profound shift in how piracy was viewed and executed in the Golden Age. While most pirate captains saw piracy as an individual pursuit of wealth and glory, Roberts saw it as a collective mission, a revolution on the seas that could disrupt the established power structures of Europe. His mind was always thinking 2 steps ahead of his rivals and adversaries, carefully weighing every move for maximum impact. He understood that to maintain dominance on the seas, he had to stay ahead of the game, both in terms of military power and strategic alliances. As a leader, Roberts didn't just inspire fear, he inspired respect. He wasn't a mere opportunist, looking to seize what he could from the weak. He was a tactician, a statesman of the high seas. Unlike other pirate leaders who used brute force to maintain control over their crews, Roberts's leadership was rooted in a system of mutual respect and fairness. His pirate code, which dictated the daily operations of his fleet, enforced discipline but also provided structure and equality, even among a band of outlaws. For Roberts, piracy was not just about seizing gold and treasure. It was about establishing a code that could create order from the chaos of the seas. The strict rules regarding the division of loot, conduct, and the penalties for misconduct kept his fleet cohesive, and his reputation as a fair but firm leader earned him the loyalty of men who could have easily turned against him. What set Roberts apart wasn't simply his brilliant leadership, but his ability to adapt to the shifting tides of the world around him. The colonial powers that once underestimated pirates now realized that Roberts had turned the tables. He was no longer a lone outlaw, but a force that threatened the very foundation of European power in the colonies. The European navies and governments could not ignore the sheer scale of his operations. The pirates he led were not just criminals on the fringes of society, they had become a global force, capable of undermining the wealth and stability of entire empires. Even more remarkable than his military genius, was Robert's ability to maintain control over his diverse, multinational crew. Pirates, by nature, were typically seen as outcasts from society, driven by greed and opportunism. But under Roberts, his fleet functioned as an organized and cohesive unit. Roberts had a unique ability to unite men from various backgrounds, from escaped slaves to European deserters, under a common goal. This rare ability to command such a diverse group of people, all while maintaining fairness and unity, made Roberts one of the most successful pirate leaders in history. His fleet was not just a band of marauders, it was a well-oiled machine, operating like a military unit with a shared sense of purpose. Roberts' ability to expand his empire beyond the Caribbean was also a testament to his vision. The traditional pirate targets had always been Spanish treasure fleets and merchant ships sailing in the Caribbean, but Roberts understood that these waters were already well-known hunting grounds. His ambition led him to the Indian Ocean, where he saw an opportunity to strike at the heart of global trade. By targeting the vast trade networks connecting India, Arabia, and Africa, Roberts was able to seize unimaginable wealth. But more than that, he was able to strike a blow to the colonial empires that had dominated these regions for centuries. For Roberts, the Indian Ocean was not just a sea to sail. It was a strategic location that allowed him to attack the lifeblood of European colonialism, the trade routes that supported their empires. In addition to his military and strategic brilliance, Roberts also understood the power of intelligence. While most pirates relied on chance encounters and luck, Roberts built an extensive network of informants, spies, and navigators who helped him stay one step ahead of his enemies. This intelligence network, stretching from the shores of Africa to the trade ports of the East Indies, gave Roberts an edge that no other pirate possessed. His ability to anticipate where the most valuable ships would be and to calculate the best times to strike made him a fearsome adversary to the European powers. This foresight allowed him to plan his raids with precision and, ultimately, outsmart his enemies at every turn. Roberts's rise to power was not without its challenges. The European powers, especially the British, Spanish, and French, saw him as a direct threat to their control over the global trade system. His success prompted increasingly aggressive efforts to destroy him and his fleet. But Roberts never backed down. His brilliance as a tactician and leader ensured that, for a time, he was nearly untouchable. Even when the British Navy came close to capturing him, Roberts found a way to evade their grasp. His leadership, strategic ingenuity, and uncanny ability to read the political and military landscape ensured that he remained at the top, a pirate king whose empire seemed unstoppable. Roberts' story is one of vision, strategy, and defiance against a world that sought to crush him. His impact on piracy was profound. He transformed it from a series of isolated attacks into a global enterprise that challenged the very empires that ruled the world. Through his innovative approach to leadership, logistics, alliances, and strategy, Roberts became the embodiment of the pirate's dream, not just as a thief of treasures, but as a revolutionary force that could change the course of history. His legacy endures not just as a pirate, but as a leader who saw piracy not just as an act of rebellion, but as a strategy to rewrite the rules of the global order. He wasn't merely out to fill his coffers with gold. He sought to create something larger, a pirate empire that could rival the colonial powers and disrupt the flow of wealth that sustained them. In doing so, he left a lasting impact on the world, forever changing the nature of piracy and its place in history. Bartholomew Roberts's rise to fame as one of the most powerful pirates in history didn't come by chance. It came through a unique combination of intelligence, extraordinary leadership, and a relentless drive to build an empire that could challenge the might of the European empires. While the other pirates of his era were focused on the short-term thrill of plundering treasure fleets, Roberts saw the big picture. He was not just a pirate, he was a strategist, a visionary, and a master of warfare who understood that piracy could be transformed into a sophisticated operation capable of challenging the very structures that defined global trade and imperial power. Roberts' story began as one of humble origins, but it was his mind, his vision, and his strategic brilliance that elevated him far beyond the rank of ordinary pirate. Unlike the chaotic world of piracy, where pirates were often seen as random, opportunistic criminals, Roberts understood that a successful pirate fleet needed a clear structure. The problem with piracy, as Roberts saw it, was that it had no cohesive structure. Each pirate ship operated on its own, pursuing whatever prey they could find. Some pirates, even the most successful ones, were essentially opportunists who simply preyed on the wealthiest targets. But this often led to chaos, lack of long-term sustainability, and disorganization. Roberts knew that this model had to be changed if piracy was to become a true force. He saw piracy as a collective enterprise that could be turned into a business. Instead of simply taking what they could from the sea, Roberts sought to organize his fleet into a functioning entity, a force that could take on entire nations and wreak havoc on the global economy. His insight was simple yet profound. Piracy needed to be efficient, it needed to be sustainable, and it needed to have long-term goals. His operations from the Caribbean to the coasts of West Africa and beyond weren't mere spur-of-the-moment attacks, but part of a calculated strategy to strike at the heart of global trade. To build his empire, Roberts first set his eyes on the systems of power that governed the world's trade routes. He understood that the global trade routes were the lifeblood of empires like Britain, Spain, and France. These were the arteries through which the wealth of the colonies flowed, and Roberts realized that by targeting these vital trade routes, he could not only disrupt these empires, but cripple them financially. He didn't just attack ships randomly, he attacked the heart of the empires that relied on those trade routes to maintain their power. His strategic brilliance lay in targeting the most valuable and lucrative trade lanes, where the most precious goods were being carried. The traditional targets for pirates of the time were the Spanish treasure fleets, laden with gold and silver from the Americas. But Roberts, ever the visionary, saw an opportunity to expand his horizons. While many pirates remained fixated on the treasure ships of the Caribbean, Roberts turned his attention to the Indian Ocean, where wealth was far more abundant and the trade routes were less protected. This was the moment that set Roberts apart from his contemporaries. He realized that the riches of the Mughal Empire, the vast treasures carried along the trade routes between India, Arabia, and Africa, were far greater than anything the Spanish could offer. Gold, silver, silk, spices, and precious stones, the loot that Roberts sought, was nothing short of the lifeblood of an entire empire. In the Indian Ocean, Roberts saw an opportunity not just for wealth, but for dominance. He knew that if he could control these trade routes, he would effectively be controlling the flow of global commerce. He was able to disrupt entire empires, such as the Mughal Empire, which was one of the wealthiest powers of the time. The riches transported along these routes were unparalleled, and Roberts, with his fleet, systematically plundered these valuable ships, shaking the very foundations of the empire's control over the seas. His raids were meticulously planned, each attack carried out with precision. But it wasn't just about taking treasure, it was about breaking the trade networks that allowed European powers to thrive. Unlike most pirates who relied on luck or brute force to find and capture ships, Roberts' fleet had a network of intelligence that allowed him to predict where valuable targets would be. His men worked tirelessly, gathering information from across the world, keeping an eye on the movements of merchant ships, and allowing Roberts to strike at the perfect moment. This intelligence network, combined with Roberts's genius for logistics and organization, gave him an unparalleled advantage. His fleet was always one step ahead of the authorities and rival pirates. Roberts's influence wasn't limited to the seas alone. He understood the importance of establishing relationships with local rulers, especially in regions where piracy could thrive. Madagascar, a remote island off the east coast of Africa, became one of Roberts' key strategic locations. In exchange for protection and supplies, Roberts struck deals with local African rulers, ensuring that his pirates would have access to safe ports and provisions. These alliances were not just for convenience, they were a critical part of Roberts's long-term strategy to ensure that his fleet could operate independently of the European powers. The local rulers provided Roberts with crucial resources, while his pirates brought valuable European goods, firearms, and military assistance in return. These alliances, though often short-term and built on mutual benefit, were crucial to the success of Roberts' empire. They allowed his fleet to operate with impunity in regions that were beyond the reach of European navies. The relationships Roberts built with local rulers gave him access to ports and safe havens where his fleet could rest, resupply, and prepare for the next raid. These bases were essential to maintaining the operational effectiveness of his fleet. Unlike other pirates, who relied on temporary hideouts and constant mobility, Roberts built a network of strategic locations that allowed him to maintain a stronghold in key regions. This infrastructure, built through diplomacy and cunning, ensured that Roberts' pirate empire could continue its operations for years without needing to return to Europe for resupply or reinforcements. But what truly made Roberts' empire so successful was his ability to inspire loyalty and discipline among his crew. Unlike many pirate captains who ruled through fear and intimidation, Roberts created a system that valued equality and fairness. He implemented a pirate code, a set of rules that governed every aspect of life aboard his ships. This code was revolutionary for its time. It wasn't just about dividing the spoils of a raid, it also dealt with how disputes would be handled, how the crew would maintain discipline, and how each member would have a say in the operations of the ship. The idea of equality among pirates, especially at a time when social hierarchies were rigid, was groundbreaking. Roberts ensured that his fleet was not just a group of criminals, it was a collective, with each member playing a crucial role in the success of the mission. By creating a sense of shared purpose, Roberts was able to maintain unity and morale within his fleet, ensuring that every member of his crew was invested in the success of the pirate empire. His leadership was defined not only by his strategic genius, but by his ability to unify his men under a common cause. Pirates weren't just in it for treasure, they were in it to build something larger, to create a pirate empire that could rival the great colonial powers. Roberts' leadership wasn't about fear, it was about respect, and it was this respect that made him one of the most successful pirate captains in history. His fleet wasn't a haphazard collection of rogue ships. It was a disciplined, highly organized force, and Roberts was the mastermind behind it. However, Roberts's empire wasn't without its challenges. As his power grew, so did the opposition against him. The European powers, which had long tolerated piracy as a minor nuisance, now saw Roberts as a serious threat to their empires. The British, French, and Spanish navies mobilized to eliminate him, but despite their overwhelming military strength, they could not break Roberts's grip on the seas. His brilliance in avoiding capture, his ability to outmaneuver and outthink his enemies, ensured that his fleet remained a constant threat to the empires that sought to destroy him. Despite the mounting pressure, Roberts never backed down. He knew that the stakes were higher than just personal survival. It was about proving that piracy could be more than just a crime. It could be a political force, an alternative system that could challenge the very foundations of colonial rule. Roberts's empire was more than just a fleet of ships. It was a symbol of rebellion against a world that sought to control and subjugate. He wasn't just a pirate, he was a revolutionary. Bartholomew Roberts's rise to power marked a turning point in the history of piracy. He turned piracy from a chaotic and opportunistic activity into a disciplined, strategic enterprise capable of challenging the colonial powers. His story is not just one of gold and treasure, it's a story of leadership, vision, and revolution. Roberts didn't just want to be a pirate king, he wanted to change the world, and in doing so, he left a legacy that continues to captivate our imaginations, a legacy that shows how a single man with vision and determination can transform an entire industry and alter the course of history. Bartholomew Roberts's influence extended far beyond the seas he dominated. The way he constructed his pirate empire, with its careful organization, strategic alliances, and disciplined crew, served as a model for both pirates and outlaws who sought to emulate his success. Roberts's vision was revolutionary. He did not see himself simply as a man who sought treasure or fame, but as a force that could rival the great empires of his time. His empire wasn't just built on the foundation of piracy, but on the principle that an organized, effective system could undermine the very foundations of the world's most powerful nations. In the broader context of his time, Roberts represented a rare example of someone who understood that the success of piracy lay not just in the strength of one's ship or crew, but in the ability to manipulate and control the system that governed the world. Roberts understood the critical importance of building networks not just of pirates, but of informants, local rulers, and anyone who could provide him with the intelligence he needed to stay ahead of the game. Unlike other pirates who relied solely on brute force, Roberts was always one step ahead, using his wit, his network, and his strategic alliances to further his empire. While Roberts' fleet wreaked havoc on European trade routes, particularly in the Caribbean and the Indian Ocean, his influence was felt most significantly in the way he redefined piracy itself. Pirates, for centuries, had been isolated bands of thieves, looting whatever they could from merchant vessels and often fighting among themselves for spoils. They lacked any sort of long-term strategy, often falling back into chaos as soon as the next raid was over. Roberts, on the other hand, saw piracy as a long-term venture that could sustain itself. He meticulously planned raids, built a system for distributing spoils among the crew, and ensured that his pirates operated like a well-oiled machine. His pirate code, which governed the crew's conduct, established a sense of order and fairness, unheard of in an environment that was usually ruled by fear and violence. His intelligence networks didn't just predict where the richest targets would be, they also enabled him to stay one step ahead of the European navies hunting him down. While many pirates were caught in the short-term thrill of their gains, Roberts was always thinking about the long-term implications of every raid he conducted. His fleet didn't just operate haphazardly, taking whatever came into view. Every move was calculated, every route strategically chosen, every target selected for its value to his empire. It wasn't just about getting rich, it was about building a system that would last. Perhaps what made Roberts truly unique was his ability to gain the loyalty of his crew and inspire them to follow him in pursuit of his revolutionary vision. His leadership style was far from the typical pirate captain who ruled by fear and intimidation. Instead, Roberts' approach was grounded in mutual respect and fairness. His pirate code set out clear rules for the distribution of spoils, the settlement of disputes, and the treatment of fellow pirates. This sense of equality and fairness was a cornerstone of his fleet's success. Pirates under Roberts weren't just driven by the desire for treasure, but by the shared belief that they were part of something larger, a revolutionary force that could change the rules of the game. Roberts' code also helped keep the crew motivated and unified. It wasn't just a set of rules, it was a social contract that gave each pirate a stake in the success of the mission. The promise of a fair share of the loot, the right to speak up and be heard, and the knowledge that they would be treated with dignity were powerful motivators that kept the crew loyal, even when faced with the dangers of the high seas. Roberts' ability to instill discipline and respect in his pirates was, in many ways, what allowed him to create such a successful empire. It was the glue that held his fleet together, preventing infighting and ensuring that everyone worked together toward a common goal. Of course, this system was not without its challenges. As Roberts' success grew, so did the efforts to bring him down. The European powers saw him not just as a pirate, but as a direct threat to their empires. His ability to outmaneuver and outthink his enemies was legendary, but the sheer power of the British, Spanish, and French navies made it inevitable that Roberts would eventually face the full force of the European military machine. The final confrontation between Roberts and the Royal Navy would, in the end, seal his fate. But even in death, Roberts left a legacy that would forever change the world of piracy. Despite his demise, the empire that Roberts built continued to inspire pirates long after he was gone. His ability to transform piracy into an organized, efficient operation set a new standard for what it meant to be a pirate. His methods, his strategies, and his leadership style influenced countless others who followed in his wake. Even as piracy became less common in the 18th century, the lessons learned from Roberts' reign would live on in the stories of pirates who admired his brilliance and ambition. Roberts' legacy extends far beyond his time. His impact on piracy was not just in the treasure he amassed, or the fear he inspired in his enemies, but in the way he turned piracy into a coordinated, strategic enterprise that could rival the great empires of the world. Roberts demonstrated that the true power of piracy lay not in its lawlessness, but in its ability to disrupt the status quo, challenge authority, and rewrite the rules of the game. His story is not just one of gold and adventure. It is a story of revolution, of vision, and of a man who understood that with the right organization, leadership, and strategy, even the most oppressed and marginalized could rise up to challenge the might of the most powerful nations. Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart, remains one of the most remarkable figures in the history of piracy. His reign over the high seas was not only marked by unprecedented success, but also by a vision that transcended the boundaries of traditional piracy. While many of his contemporaries were driven by immediate greed and the chaotic pursuit of wealth, Roberts took a different path, one that was calculated, deliberate, and strategic. His legacy, though often overshadowed by the more notorious figures of the Golden Age of Piracy, stands as a testament to the transformative power of leadership and foresight. From his early days as a pirate to his eventual rise as one of the most feared and respected figures on the seas, Roberts was a man who understood the dynamics of power. He saw piracy not as a haphazard venture, but as an enterprise that could challenge the established order of the world. To Roberts, piracy was not merely about stealing treasure, but about reshaping the global economic landscape and creating a system that could rival the great empires of Europe. His success wasn't accidental. It was the result of an intricate plan that he carefully executed over years, building his fleet and his empire through a combination of organizational genius, tactical brilliance, and an understanding of global trade systems. What set Roberts apart from the countless pirates who came before him was his strategic vision. Whereas most pirates were opportunists, taking whatever they could from ships they happened to encounter, Roberts was methodical. He didn't simply raid ships, he targeted the most lucrative and valuable trade routes, focusing his efforts on the arteries that connected the wealthiest regions of the world. He understood that to truly disrupt the global economy and challenge the European empires, he had to strike at the heart of their commerce. And so, Roberts expanded his operations beyond the Caribbean, where most pirates operated, into the Indian Ocean and the coasts of West Africa, targeting the incredibly rich trade routes of the Mughal Empire and other East Indian trading powers. Roberts' fleet became a symbol of organized resistance against the imperial powers that dominated the global trade system. While most pirates relied on the element of surprise, attacking ships randomly and often without much preparation, Roberts' fleet operated with military precision. He built an empire that didn't just rely on violence, but on logistics, intelligence, and coordination. Roberts understood the importance of planning, and he was meticulous about the way he managed his fleet. Unlike other pirate captains who returned to port after every raid to resupply, Roberts' fleet was self-sustaining. His ships could remain at sea for months without needing to return to land, thanks to his careful management of supplies, ammunition, and provisions. This unique advantage allowed him to conduct long, sustained campaigns, striking fear into the hearts of traders and empires alike. But Roberts' success was not merely due to his ability to maintain his fleet. It was his deep understanding of the global trade systems and his ability to manipulate them to his advantage. He recognized the immense wealth that flowed through the global trade routes, particularly the ones connecting the Indian subcontinent, Arabia, and Africa. The Mughal Empire, one of the wealthiest empires in the world, transported unimaginable amounts of gold, silver, spices, silk, and other valuable commodities along these routes. By targeting these ships, Roberts didn't just gain wealth, he crippled the economic systems that these empires relied on to maintain their power. His operations in the Indian Ocean were some of the most ambitious of any pirate in history. Unlike many pirates who focused on stealing treasure from Spanish galleons, Roberts turned his sights on a much larger prize: entire trade networks. He understood that the wealth of the Mughal Empire and other Eastern powers was more lucrative than the gold of the Spanish treasure fleets. By targeting these routes, Roberts effectively cut off the economic lifeblood of these empires, forcing them to divert resources and military power to protect their trade. But Roberts's empire wasn't just about targeting specific ships or plundering treasure. It was about creating a system that could sustain itself, operate without external help, and outlast the European powers that sought to bring him down. He wasn't merely a pirate captain, he was a master of organization. His fleet was not a random collection of ships, it was a coordinated and disciplined force. Each ship was part of a larger plan, and each pirate was part of an enterprise that stretched beyond personal gain. Roberts created a sense of unity among his crew, instilling in them a shared purpose. His pirate code was revolutionary. While many pirate captains ruled through fear and intimidation, Roberts governed through respect and fairness. He ensured that every member of his crew had a say in the operations of the fleet, and that the spoils of their raids were divided fairly. This sense of equality and shared purpose made Roberts' fleet one of the most cohesive and successful in pirate history. The success of Roberts' fleet was also a result of his intelligence networks. While most pirates relied on luck or chance to find their targets, Roberts had a system of gathering intelligence that allowed him to stay one step ahead of his enemies. His crew, spread across the world, collected information about the movements of merchant ships, the trade routes, and the schedules of the vessels carrying the most valuable cargo. This allowed Roberts to plan his raids with incredible precision, striking at the perfect moment. His intelligence network wasn't just about finding targets, it was about knowing when and where to strike. This foresight, combined with his logistical prowess, made Roberts' fleet nearly untouchable. Even when the European powers tried to organize coordinated efforts to capture him, Roberts' ability to outmaneuver them kept him and his fleet safe for years. One of the most remarkable aspects of Roberts' rise to power was his ability to form strategic alliances with local rulers. While many pirates acted as lone wolves, Roberts understood that in order to create a lasting empire, he would need to build relationships with the people who controlled the regions where he operated. Madagascar, a key base for his fleet, became one of his most important alliances. In exchange for protection and supplies, Roberts struck deals with the local African rulers, ensuring that his fleet would have access to safe ports and provisions. These alliances were crucial to Roberts' success. They gave him the resources he needed to maintain his fleet, and they allowed his empire to operate without interference from European powers. These alliances were not just about trade. They were about building a network of resources that could support Roberts' operations over the long term. His ability to forge these alliances demonstrated his understanding of the broader political landscape. He wasn't just a pirate looking for treasure, he was a strategist who saw the value in building a system that could sustain itself and grow. His relationships with local rulers gave him the ability to operate freely in areas that were beyond the reach of European navies. While other pirates relied on the element of surprise and the mobility of their ships, Roberts built a network of ports, safe havens, and resources that allowed his fleet to remain active for years without needing to return to Europe for resupply. Roberts' leadership wasn't just about organizing a fleet, it was about creating a sense of unity and shared purpose among his crew. His pirate code, which emphasized equality and fairness, gave his crew a sense of ownership and responsibility. Pirates under Roberts didn't just fight for treasure, they fought for something bigger, something that could change the world. They were part of a collective effort to challenge the imperial powers that dominated the global economy. Roberts wasn't just a pirate captain, he was a revolutionary, a man who understood that the true power of piracy lay not in violence, but in its ability to disrupt the world order. However, Roberts' success wasn't without its challenges. As his empire grew, so did the efforts to bring him down. The European powers, which had long tolerated piracy, now saw Roberts as a direct threat to their control over the seas. The British, Spanish, and French navies all mobilized to destroy Roberts and his fleet, but despite their overwhelming military might, Roberts continued to elude capture. His ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast his enemies made him one of the most formidable pirates in history. Even as the European powers closed in on him, Roberts refused to back down. He understood that the stakes were higher than just his survival. They were about proving that piracy could be more than just a crime. It could be a force that challenged the imperial order. Bartholomew Roberts' rise to power is one of the most fascinating and significant stories in the history of piracy. He transformed piracy from a chaotic, disorganized activity into a systematic, organized empire that challenged the might of the European powers. His ability to build a self-sustaining fleet, his strategic intelligence, his alliances with local rulers, and his revolutionary leadership style made him a figure whose legacy continues to resonate to this day. Roberts was not just a pirate. He was a visionary who understood that with the right systems, the right strategy, and the right leadership, piracy could become a force that could change the world. His empire may have fallen, but the legacy of his ambition, his organization, and his vision remains a powerful testament to the ability of one man to challenge the established order and rewrite the rules of the game. Bartholomew Roberts's empire, built on the seas with tactical brilliance and visionary leadership, was more than a mere testament to piracy. It was a profound challenge to the global power structures of his time. Unlike the typical pirate who sought immediate gratification through random raids, Roberts sought to build something much larger, an organized, self-sustaining empire. His unparalleled ability to operate with precision, maintain a disciplined crew, and manipulate global trade routes set him apart from all who came before him. He understood, perhaps more deeply than any other pirate, that piracy was not just about taking treasure. It was about disrupting the global system of commerce and imperial control. However, Roberts' leadership style and his empire-building abilities were not solely about financial gain or the pursuit of power. His actions were rooted in a desire to challenge the imperial powers that had long suppressed those under their control, both in the colonies and back home in Europe. Through his innovative approach to piracy, Roberts created an alternative structure, one that was, in its own way, more egalitarian than the rigid monarchies and colonial systems he opposed. His crews were governed by a code that ensured fairness, democracy, and shared responsibility. In this sense, his fleet became more than just a pirate crew. It became a symbol of rebellion against a world that had long sought to control and exploit others. Roberts wasn't merely a captain. He was a leader who inspired loyalty through respect, not fear. His ability to unite diverse men and women under his banner pirates, sailors, former slaves, and defectors from the imperial navies demonstrated his exceptional ability to build solidarity in a world that often saw such unity as impossible. Through his vision and ability to inspire, Roberts built an empire that didn't merely exist to take from others. It existed to challenge the existing structures of power. In a sense, Roberts's piracy was revolutionary. Yet, as with any revolution, the seeds of Roberts' eventual downfall were sown by the very success of his empire. As his fleet grew stronger and his raids more devastating, the European powers began to recognize the threat he posed to their global dominance. What had once been a nuisance, a group of pirates disrupting the Caribbean trade routes, had now become a genuine force that was undermining their very grip on world trade. The British, the French, the Spanish No Empire wanted to tolerate an independent force as powerful as Roberts's pirate fleet. They had long believed that piracy was something they could manage, an issue they could control with military might and occasional naval patrols. But Roberts was different. His fleet was larger, more organized, and more sophisticated than any pirate force that had come before him. The threat Roberts posed was not only to their military supremacy, but to their economic control. The trade routes that he targeted were the lifeblood of the European empires, and Roberts' disruptions to these routes were taking a tangible toll on their economies. The merchant fleets, once secure and predictable in their routes, were now constantly under threat, and the European powers knew that if they didn't act soon, Roberts's piracy could destabilize their entire economic system. The realization that Roberts was not just another pirate, but a revolutionary force who was capable of reshaping global commerce, prompted these empires to take serious action against him. However, even as the European powers mobilized their forces to destroy Roberts and his fleet, Roberts refused to be intimidated. He knew that he was up against immense odds, but he also understood that he held a unique advantage: his ability to think and act faster than his opponents. The European navies, though powerful, were slow to adapt to the changing nature of piracy. They relied on traditional naval tactics and large-scale battles, while Roberts' pirates operated with speed, flexibility, and cunning. Roberts had already outsmarted them once, and he was determined to do so again. Roberts's tactics were not just about evading capture, they were about preserving his fleet and continuing his mission. His brilliance as a strategist lay not only in his ability to plan raids, but in his capacity to maintain the health and effectiveness of his fleet. He understood that his empire's success was not only about what they could take, but how long they could sustain their operations. This was the key to Roberts' success: the self-sufficiency of his fleet, the cohesion of his crew, and the strategic intelligence that kept him one step ahead of his enemies. Unfortunately, even the greatest of leaders cannot defy the inevitable forever. The European powers, now fully aware of the extent of the threat that Roberts posed, began to act with renewed urgency. Roberts' fleet, which had once been a well-oiled machine of precision, began to face increasing pressure from all sides. The European navies, once unable to deal with the decentralized and unpredictable nature of piracy, began to adapt to Roberts's tactics. Roberts, always a step ahead, was aware that the end of his reign was inevitable, but he faced his downfall with the same determination and brilliance that had marked his rise. Bartholomew Roberts's legacy remains a defining moment in the history of piracy. He was not just a pirate, but a visionary who sought to build something far larger than himself. A pirate empire that could challenge the might of the European empires and change the course of history. His ability to turn piracy into a calculated, strategic force has ensured that his story endures. While his empire may have ultimately fallen to the might of the imperial powers, the impact of his vision, his leadership, and his unprecedented success is still felt today. Roberts did not merely seek treasure, he sought to change the world. In doing so, he left a legacy that transcends the world of piracy and serves as a testament to the power of vision, leadership, and revolution. Even in the face of overwhelming opposition, Roberts's vision never wavered, and his story continues to inspire those who believe that one person, with enough determination and vision, can indeed change the world. Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart, remains one of the most fascinating figures in the annals of piracy. His legacy, though not as well known as that of some of his contemporaries, holds a place of significance not only for his achievements, but also for the way he revolutionized piracy. Roberts was not the average pirate, nor was he driven by the usual impulses that motivated the majority of his peers. While many of the pirates in his era were opportunists driven by the thrill of raiding treasure ships, by the lust for gold, and the hope of quick fortune, Roberts had a grand vision, one that went far beyond simply collecting wealth. He sought to build an empire, a pirate kingdom, that would challenge the global systems of power and commerce. What made Roberts so unique among pirates was not merely his ability to capture ships and plunder their treasures, but his deep understanding of the world around him and his ability to exploit the systems that governed the seas. His brilliance lay in his strategic vision, his unparalleled ability to organize and lead, and his ability to turn piracy from a chaotic and lawless pursuit into a well-organized, self-sustaining force that could rival the most powerful empires in the world. While most pirates were driven by short-term gain, Roberts was focused on the long game. He understood that in order for piracy to be successful on a grand scale, it had to be organized, sustainable, and strategic. His fleet was not a ragtag bunch of rebels, but rather a disciplined force with a clear mission. Under his leadership, piracy became more than a mere act of theft. It became a business, a well-coordinated enterprise aimed at disrupting the flow of global trade and toppling the established powers that dominated the world. Roberts saw piracy not as a mere revolt against imperial powers, but as a systematic challenge to the very structures that kept those powers in control. At the time Roberts rose to prominence, piracy was largely seen as a fragmented and opportunistic activity. Pirate ships would roam the seas, looking for easy targets, often without a clear sense of purpose or organization. These pirates were usually isolated in their actions and had little in the way of infrastructure or long-term plans. Some of the most famous pirates of the time, including Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, were opportunists who capitalized on random opportunities. But Roberts was different. He understood that in order for piracy to be truly effective, it needed to be built on a foundation of organization, strategy, and logistics. It needed to be a well-oiled machine, a fleet that could operate on its own without the need for constant resupply or retreat to port. One of Roberts's greatest innovations was his ability to sustain his fleet at sea for extended periods of time. Unlike other pirates who would return to port after each raid to resupply, Roberts established a system that allowed his ships to stay out on the water for months at a time. His fleet was self-sustaining, capable of operating far from land without running out of food, water, or ammunition. This logistical brilliance was what allowed Roberts to strike fear into the hearts of traders and navies alike, because his ships could appear anywhere, at any time, and remain a threat long after most pirates would have been forced to return to port. Roberts' strategic thinking went beyond just logistics. He understood that in order to disrupt the world's great empires, he He needed to attack their most valuable and vulnerable points, their trade routes. The European colonial powers of the time, particularly the British, French, and Spanish, depended on the wealth flowing from their colonies. This wealth, primarily in the form of precious metals, spices, and other valuable commodities, was carried along the global trade routes by merchant ships. Roberts recognized that in order to truly make a mark, he needed to attack these vital arteries. While most pirates focused on treasure fleets, Roberts expanded his targets to include entire trade routes, attacking ships not only in the Caribbean, but also in the Indian Ocean and off the coast of West Africa. In the Indian Ocean, Roberts found a treasure trove of wealth far greater than anything that could be found in the Caribbean. The Mughal Empire, one of the richest and most powerful empires in the world at the time, was sending vast quantities of gold, silk, spices, and precious stones along the trade routes between India, Arabia, and Africa. This trade was far more lucrative than the Spanish treasure fleets, and Roberts knew it. By focusing on these trade routes, Roberts was able to plunder entire empires, targeting ships carrying unimaginable wealth. The raids in the Indian Ocean were not simply acts of theft, they were strategic moves that disrupted the very fabric of global trade. But Roberts wasn't content to simply raid ships. He built a pirate empire that could challenge the European powers in a way that no pirate had ever done before. His fleet wasn't just a random collection of ships, but a carefully coordinated force with specific targets, goals, and plans. This fleet was more than just a tool for plundering. It was a means of asserting power over the seas. Roberts wasn't just stealing treasure, he was dismantling the global economic order, one ship at a time. This didn't go unnoticed by the European powers, who saw Roberts as a serious threat to their control over global trade. His ability to disrupt the world's most valuable trade routes, to plunder empires with relative impunity, and to build a self-sustaining fleet that could operate far from land was something they had never encountered before. For the first time, pirates were not just a nuisance, but a serious challenge to the established order. But Roberts's genius wasn't limited to his strategic vision. He also understood the importance of alliances. While many pirates operated alone or in loose coalitions, Roberts built strong relationships with local rulers, particularly in areas like Madagascar. In exchange for protection and supplies, Roberts struck deals with local rulers, ensuring that his fleet had access to safe ports and resources. These alliances were critical to Roberts' ability to operate independently of the European powers, and they allowed his fleet to remain hidden and protected in regions where European navies had little influence. Roberts' fleet was not just about naval power, it was about building a network of resources and alliances that could support piracy for the long term. He was not simply interested in short-term raids. He was building a sustainable empire, one that could continue operating for years without the need for reinforcements from Europe. This ability to think long-term, to build infrastructure and resources that could support his fleet, was one of the key factors that made Roberts so successful. Furthermore, Roberts' leadership style set him apart from many other pirate captains. While other pirates ruled with an iron fist, using fear and intimidation to control their crews, Roberts created a system based on fairness and equality. He implemented a pirate code that ensured that every member of his crew had a say in the decisions of the fleet, and that the spoils of their raids were divided equally. This sense of equality and shared responsibility helped foster loyalty and unity within the crew, which in turn made Roberts' fleet one of the most disciplined and effective pirate forces in history. Roberts' leadership wasn't just about running a successful fleet, it was about building a community. He understood that in order for his fleet to succeed, it had to function as a unit, with each member working toward a common goal. His leadership inspired a sense of shared purpose among his crew, and this sense of unity allowed them to achieve remarkable success. However, as Roberts' empire grew, so did the efforts to bring him down. The European powers, seeing the threat he posed, began to mobilize their navies in an attempt to destroy him. The British, Spanish, and French navies all launched coordinated efforts to capture Roberts and eliminate his fleet. But Roberts' brilliance in evading capture, his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies, ensured that he and his fleet remained a powerful force on the seas for years. Roberts' rise to power was not without its challenges, but his vision, his strategic thinking, and his ability to unite his crew under a common cause allowed him to become one of the most successful pirates in history. His legacy continues to be remembered not just for the wealth he accumulated or the havoc he wreaked on European trade, but for the way he transformed piracy from a chaotic, disorganized activity into a well-organized, efficient, and strategic force that challenged the might of the European empires. In the end, Roberts didn't just create a pirate empire, he created a lasting symbol of rebellion, one that showed how even the most oppressed and marginalized could rise up and create something far greater than themselves. His story is a testament to the power of vision, strategy, and leadership, and his impact on history remains felt to this day. The legacy of Bartholomew Roberts, the Pirate King, is one that continues to captivate the imagination, showing that even the most unconventional leaders can change the course of history. Bartholomew Roberts' legacy is more than just a tale of pirate plundering and high-seas drama. It is a narrative of ingenuity, foresight, and an indomitable will to alter the course of history. What truly sets him apart from his contemporaries is not merely the vast fortune he accumulated, but his ability to craft a pirate empire that defied the might of European colonial powers. While other pirates of the Golden Age were driven by personal ambition and the transient thrill of wealth, Roberts understood that piracy could be elevated into a fully structured, formidable force capable of challenging the global order. In doing so, he not only reshaped piracy, but laid the groundwork for an entirely new paradigm of resistance and rebellion against imperial domination. The strategic nature of Roberts' endeavours was evident in his remarkable ability to operate a fleet that was self-sustaining and independent. Unlike most pirates, who depended on returning to port for resupplies after every raid, Roberts ensured that his ships were well equipped to stay out on the high seas for months at a time. This logistical brilliance allowed his fleet to remain active and unpredictable, a key advantage that made it difficult for European navies to contain his operations. The significance of this innovation cannot be overstated. Roberts, in essence, created a new model for piracy, one that was less about isolated acts of violence and more about sustained, coordinated campaigns. Furthermore, Roberts had a unique understanding of the global economic systems that governed trade and commerce during his time. His ability to target the most lucrative trade routes was a testament to his strategic acumen. He knew that to cripple the European colonial powers, he needed to attack the arteries of global trade, the very channels through which wealth flowed from the colonies back to Europe. His raids on the Mughal Empire's trade routes, for example, were not only financially successful but also strategically significant, as they disrupted the vital exchange of goods and wealth between India, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. By targeting these trade routes, Roberts struck at the heart of European colonial power, threatening the very foundation of their economic and political control. Roberts was also able to harness the power of intelligence networks, using the information gathered by his crew to stay ahead of both merchant ships and naval forces. This foresight allowed him to strike at precisely the right moments, taking advantage of weaknesses in the shipping lanes and exploiting opportunities that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. His network of informants across the globe provided him with a wealth of knowledge about the movements of ships, allowing him to anticipate when and where he could find the richest targets. This information was invaluable in helping him maintain an edge over his adversaries and further solidify his reputation as a master strategist. What made Roberts even more remarkable was his ability to forge alliances with local rulers, particularly in regions like Madagascar, where piracy flourished. He understood that in order for his empire to thrive, he needed more than just naval superiority. He needed to establish relationships that would ensure the sustainability of his operations. These alliances gave him access to key ports, safe havens, and supplies, which were crucial to maintaining the operational efficiency of his fleet. His ability to navigate these diplomatic relationships, striking mutually beneficial deals with African rulers, was a clear indication of his political savvy. Roberts was not merely a pirate captain, he was a shrewd negotiator and statesman who understood the power of alliances in achieving long-term goals. Under Roberts's leadership, piracy became more than a mere act of theft. It became a collective enterprise, a business in its own right. The pirate code he implemented was groundbreaking in its approach, emphasizing fairness, equality, and a shared sense of responsibility. Unlike other pirate leaders, who often ruled through fear and intimidation, Roberts created a system of governance that inspired loyalty and unity among his crew. Pirates aboard his ships had a say in the decisions that affected them, and the spoils of their raids were divided equitably. This sense of fairness, combined with the camaraderie fostered by the pirate code, allowed Roberts to maintain discipline within his fleet and ensure that every member of his crew was invested in the success of the pirate empire. Roberts' ability to lead with respect and fairness, rather than through brute force, was one of the key reasons for the success of his fleet. His leadership was marked by a sense of shared purpose, where pirates weren't simply in it for personal gain, but for a collective cause to disrupt the global economic order and challenge the imperial powers that had long dominated the seas. This sense of purpose, along with Roberts's unwavering determination, helped forge a pirate empire that became one of the most formidable forces on the seas. Yet, Roberts' story was not one of unbroken success. As his empire grew, so too did the efforts of European powers to bring him down. The British, French, and Spanish navies were all mobilized to eliminate the threat he posed, but Roberts' ability to outmaneuver and evade capture allowed him to remain a powerful force for years. Despite the mounting pressure from the European powers, Roberts refused to back down. He understood that the stakes were higher than just his own survival. They were about proving that piracy could be more than just a criminal activity. It could be a force that challenged the very foundation of colonial rule. Ultimately, the legacy of Bartholomew Roberts extends beyond his tactical genius and pirate empire. His story is one of vision, leadership, and the relentless pursuit of something greater than personal gain. Through his actions, Roberts showed that piracy could be a political force, one capable of altering the balance of power on the world stage. He built an empire that disrupted the flow of global commerce and challenged the imperial powers that controlled vast portions of the world. His legacy continues to captivate the imagination, not just because of the wealth he accumulated or the havoc he caused, but because of the way he changed the very nature of piracy. Roberts' rise to power marked a turning point in the history of piracy. He turned it from a chaotic, opportunistic activity into a well-organized, strategic enterprise that could challenge the great empires of Europe. His success was not simply the result of his ability to steal treasure, but of his ability to think long-term, to build a sustainable system that could operate independently of European powers, and to inspire loyalty and unity among his crew. He proved that even the most oppressed and marginalized could rise up and create something far greater than themselves. In the end, Roberts wasn't just a pirate, he was a visionary and a revolutionary whose legacy continues to influence the way we think about leadership, strategy, and the power of collective action. Bartholomew Roberts, the pirate king known as Black Bart, remains one of the most compelling figures in the history of piracy, not just for his feats on the high seas, but for his lasting impact on the pirate world and the global systems of trade that he sought to disrupt. His rise to power was no accident, but rather the result of a brilliant mind and a unique approach to piracy. While many pirates of his time were driven by short-term gains and simple loot, Roberts's vision was far grander. He didn't just want to be a notorious pirate. He wanted to create an empire, a self-sustaining, formidable force that could rival the great colonial powers of the time. Roberts was a master of strategic thinking, a visionary who recognized the power of organization, logistics, and planning in a field that was traditionally chaotic and lawless. He understood that in order to truly challenge the European powers that controlled the world's wealth, he had to create a pirate fleet that could operate not as a group of scattered criminals, but as a unified, disciplined force. His brilliance lay in his ability to blend the artistry of piracy with the principles of military organization. And it was this blend that allowed him to achieve what no other pirate had before: a lasting and coordinated pirate empire that struck at the heart of the global economy. Before Roberts, piracy was often seen as a fragmented and opportunistic activity. Pirates would typically raid ships at random, taking whatever they could find without any real sense of organization or long-term strategy. However, Roberts had a different approach. He saw piracy as a business, an operation that needed to be carefully managed, coordinated, and sustained. He recognized that in order to challenge the empires of Europe, piracy had to be more than just a series of isolated raids. It had to be a well-organized enterprise that could sustain itself for long periods without needing to return to port. This was a revolutionary approach that completely transformed the way piracy was viewed, making Roberts not just a pirate captain, but a revolutionary leader. The foundation of Roberts' success lay in his ability to keep his fleet at sea for extended periods. Unlike many pirates who would return to port after each raid to resupply, Roberts built a fleet that was self-sustaining. His ships could remain at sea for months, resupplying only from what they had on board or what they could obtain through their raids. This logistical brilliance gave Roberts a unique advantage over other pirates who were dependent on the traditional system of returning to land. Roberts' ability to maintain his fleet for long stretches meant that his ships could strike at merchant vessels and trading routes at any time, making them unpredictable and far more dangerous. But Roberts' genius was not just in his ability to keep his ships at sea for extended periods. It was in his strategic targeting of the world's most valuable trade routes. While many pirates focused on Spanish treasure fleets in the Caribbean, Roberts expanded his vision. He saw the vast wealth flowing from the Mughal Empire in India, from the coasts of West Africa, and the trade routes that connected the East with the West. Roberts understood that these trade routes, which transported vast quantities of gold, silk, spices, and other precious commodities, were far more lucrative than the gold-laden ships of Spain. By focusing his efforts on the Indian Ocean, Roberts was able to disrupt global trade in a way that no pirate before him had done. The riches he plundered from these trade routes were beyond anything the Caribbean could offer, and by attacking the heart of the empire's economic lifeblood, Roberts dealt a blow to the global order. The success of Roberts' strategy was not just a matter of sheer violence or brute force. It was about intelligence. Roberts didn't rely on luck or chance encounters with merchant ships. He built a network of spies and informants that gave him crucial information about the movements of ships, the trade routes, and the schedules of the wealthiest vessels. This information allowed him to plan his raids with surgical precision, striking at the perfect moment. The intelligence network Roberts created was one of the key factors that made him so successful. He knew when and where to strike, and his fleet was always one step ahead of his enemies. Yet, Roberts didn't just rely on information and strategy. He also understood the power of alliances. While many pirates operated independently, Roberts knew that to build a lasting empire, he needed to form relationships with local rulers who controlled key regions. Madagascar, for instance, became one of Roberts's most important bases. He struck deals with local African rulers, ensuring that his pirates had access to safe harbors, supplies, and protection from European forces. These alliances were crucial to Roberts' ability to maintain his fleet and operations. Without these strategic relationships, Roberts's empire would not have been able to thrive as it did. He was able to operate in regions that were beyond the reach of European navies, effectively establishing safe havens for his fleet, where they could rest, resupply, and prepare for their next raids. Roberts' fleet wasn't just a military force, it was a community. While many pirate captains ruled with an iron fist, using fear and intimidation to control their crews, Roberts created a system based on fairness and equality. He implemented a pirate code that ensured that each member of his crew had a voice in the decision-making process, and that the spoils of their raids were divided fairly. This sense of equality, combined with a shared sense of purpose, helped foster loyalty and discipline within the ranks. Pirates who served under Roberts didn't just fight for treasure, they fought for something greater, a sense of belonging to a collective enterprise that was bigger than any individual. This cohesive and disciplined crew was one of the reasons Roberts was able to build such a formidable pirate empire. His leadership was grounded in respect and fairness, not fear, and it inspired loyalty that set his fleet apart from the often chaotic pirate bands of the time. But as Roberts' empire grew, so did the efforts of European powers to eliminate him. The British, French, and Spanish navies all mobilized to destroy Roberts and his fleet, but Roberts' strategic genius allowed him to outmaneuver and outlast his enemies. Even when European forces closed in on him, Roberts continued to elude capture. His ability to think several steps ahead of his enemies, to keep his fleet well organized and self-sustaining, made him one of the most difficult pirates to catch. Despite the overwhelming military might of the European powers, Roberts remained a constant threat on the seas for years, proving that piracy could be more than just a crime. It could be a force that challenged the established powers. Ultimately, Roberts' legacy is one of revolution. He transformed piracy from a disorganized, opportunistic activity into a powerful, coordinated enterprise that could challenge the might of the European empires. His ability to lead, to organize, and to disrupt global trade made him a figure who changed the course of history. While his empire eventually fell, Roberts' story lives on as a testament to the power of vision, strategy, and leadership. His rise to power demonstrated that even the most marginalized and oppressed could challenge the established order and build something greater than themselves. Bartholomew Roberts, the Pirate King, remains a symbol of rebellion and a reminder that with the right vision, strategy, and leadership, even the most unlikely individuals can change the world. Bartholomew Roberts' legacy, though perhaps not as widely recognized as other pirate figures like Blackbeard or Captain Kidd, remains as one of the most extraordinary stories of ambition, organization, and defiance. His approach to piracy not only set him apart from his peers, but also transformed the very nature of what it meant to be a pirate during the Golden Age of Piracy. Roberts didn't just plunder ships for gold, he built a strategic empire that challenged the might of the world's colonial powers. His empire was not just a temporary rebellion against imperial systems, but a calculated, organized effort to disrupt the world's most profitable trade routes and alter the course of history. Unlike many pirates of his time who were opportunists targeting ships as they came across them, Roberts saw the bigger picture. His operations were carefully planned and executed, turning the world of piracy into a more methodical business venture. Roberts's ability to create a fleet that wasn't dependent on sporadic raids, but was able to stay at sea for months without returning to port, was a monumental breakthrough. His ships became self-sustaining machines, able to resupply from what they gathered during raids, and capable of striking wherever and whenever needed. This gave Roberts a massive advantage over pirates who were constrained by the need to return to land. His foresight extended far beyond his fleet's operational logistics. He understood the global economy and how piracy could be leveraged to exploit and disrupt it. While pirates before him often raided the Caribbean's treasure fleets, Roberts saw that the true wealth lay in the vast trading networks between the East and West. The wealth flowing from the Mughal Empire and from East Africa to Europe through the Indian Ocean was immense. By focusing on these trade routes, Roberts wasn't just stealing from wealthy merchants, he was striking at the very heart of European economic dominance. The goods that passed through these trade routes, including silk, spices, gold, and silver, were worth much more than the treasure ships of Spain. This strategic expansion into the Indian Ocean and the coasts of West Africa demonstrated his understanding that piracy, when organized and focused, could disrupt entire empires. The success of Roberts' strategy was not limited to his ability to seize valuable trade goods. It also lay in his knowledge of when and where to strike. He built an extensive network of spies and informants that provided real-time information on ship movements, cargo, and trading schedules. This intelligence network allowed him to predict and prepare for successful raids. This ability to gather and use information ensured that Roberts' fleet was never caught off guard and could carry out attacks with surgical precision. Pirates of Roberts' caliber were no longer relying on luck. They had intelligence and strategy on their side. Another crucial element of Roberts' success was his diplomatic savvy. While many pirates lived isolated from the rest of the world, Roberts understood the value of alliances. Pirates are often portrayed as solitary figures, but Roberts built relationships with local rulers, especially in key regions like Madagascar. These alliances provided Roberts with crucial resources like safe havens, food, water, and ammunition, allowing his fleet to operate independently from European colonies. By securing these safe harbours, Roberts's empire was not only able to grow in size and reach, but also became almost untouchable by European naval forces who were spread thin across vast territories. These alliances allowed Roberts to establish a pirate kingdom that could continue its operations for years without needing to rely on European ports. Roberts also recognized that maintaining control over his fleet required a new model of leadership. many pirate captains ruled through fear, using violence and intimidation to keep their crews in line. However, Roberts built a pirate kingdom based on fairness and equality. He implemented a strict pirate code that governed all aspects of life aboard his ships. Every pirate had a voice in the decisions made, and the distribution of spoils was handled with a sense of fairness that ensured loyalty and unity within his ranks. This code not only created a sense of order, but also fostered a community spirit that made Roberts's fleet one of the most cohesive and disciplined pirate forces ever to sail the seas. Through this system of equality, Roberts was able to inspire a sense of shared purpose among his men. His leadership wasn't about fear but respect, and it was this approach that solidified his control over his fleet. Pirates under his command weren't just fighting for treasure. They were part of a larger cause, a movement that aimed to disrupt the colonial empires and the capitalist systems of global trade. In an age when most pirate crews were fractured by selfish interests and internal strife, Roberts's fleet stood united under a common purpose: to challenge the imperial powers of Europe. Despite Roberts' success and the vast power his pirate kingdom gained, his story is also one of struggle and adversity. As his fleet grew in strength, so did the efforts of the European powers to destroy it. The British, French, and Spanish navies began to target Roberts and his fleet, deploying their forces to eliminate him once and for all. Yet, Roberts was never caught off guard. He had the foresight to avoid the traps set by European forces and outmaneuvered their fleets time and time again. His ability to stay ahead of the game was a testament to his brilliance. Roberts never gave up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. He knew that the stakes were higher than personal survival. He was proving that piracy could be more than just a crime. It could be a force that challenged the imperial world order. In the end, Bartholomew Roberts' legacy was one of transformation. He didn't just build a pirate empire, he transformed piracy itself. He turned it from a chaotic and lawless activity into a well-organized strategic force that could challenge entire empires. His achievements were not merely about accumulating wealth, but about showing the world that even the most oppressed and marginalized could rise up, organize, and challenge the status quo. Robert's story is a symbol of rebellion, a reminder that with vision, leadership, and a sense of purpose, even the most unlikely individuals can create an empire capable of changing the world. The impact of Roberts's vision can still be felt today, not only in the way piracy is perceived, but in how we view leadership and organization in general. He showed that leadership is not just about exerting control or ruling with an iron fist. It is about creating systems that are sustainable, that can operate independently, and that inspire loyalty and respect. Roberts's rise to power and his ability to forge an empire out of chaos continues to captivate our imaginations, reminding us of the power of vision, strategy, and leadership in overcoming even the most insurmountable odds. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, stands out as one of the most significant and impactful figures in the history of piracy. His life and legacy go far beyond the typical pirate mythos. Roberts transformed piracy from a chaotic, lawless venture into an organized, systematic force capable of challenging the global trade systems of the day. His rise to prominence wasn't driven by the traditional pirate desires for immediate wealth or personal glory, but by the strategic vision of empire building, a vision that placed him among the greatest strategists in history. Unlike most pirates, who operated independently and opportunistically, Roberts was an architect of grand schemes. He saw piracy not as an isolated act of theft, but as part of a larger rebellion against the empires that dominated global trade. His success was not merely the product of looting treasure ships, but of his unparalleled organizational ability, his tactical brilliance, and his strategic thinking. Roberts wasn't just interested in stealing gold. He sought to undermine the very systems of economic control that allowed the European colonial empires to thrive. In the years leading up to Roberts's rise, piracy was often seen as a fragmented and unpredictable activity. Pirate crews would act independently, attacking ships at random and relying on luck to gain treasure. There was no unified structure or grand strategy, and piracy often degenerated into chaos. But Roberts changed this. He saw that in order for piracy to thrive, it had to be organized, methodical, and self-sustaining. He wasn't just looking to fill his coffers with gold, He was building an empire, a well-oiled machine capable of taking on the most powerful forces in the world. Robert's fleet was not a random collection of ships, nor was it a ragtag band of outlaws. It was a disciplined, highly organized force, operating under a strict code of conduct. His ships were self-sustaining, able to operate far from land for months at a time, thanks to Robert's meticulous planning and foresight. He had the ability to keep his fleet supplied with food, water, and ammunition without needing to return to port. This innovation allowed Roberts to strike at will, without being hampered by the typical limitations of pirate fleets that had to return to port regularly to resupply. The ability to maintain a self-sustaining fleet was a game-changer. It meant that Roberts could target merchant ships and trading routes without fear of running out of resources. His fleet could appear anywhere on the seas at any time, making it nearly impossible for his enemies to predict his movements. This unpredictability, combined with his strategic use of intelligence and planning, made Roberts one of the most formidable pirates to ever sail the seas. However, Roberts's brilliance went far beyond just maintaining a fleet. What truly set him apart was his ability to identify and exploit the most valuable and vulnerable trade routes of the time. While many pirates focused on the treasure fleets of Spain in the Caribbean, Roberts expanded his operations to target entire global trade networks. He saw that the wealth of the East, the riches of the Mughal Empire, and the vast resources flowing from Africa was far greater than anything the Spanish treasure fleets could offer. By turning his attention to the Indian Ocean and the trade routes between India, Arabia, and Africa, Roberts was able to strike at the heart of the world's most profitable trade systems. Roberts understood that the European empires were dependent on these trade routes for their economic power. The vast wealth flowing through these routes was the lifeblood of the empires. By targeting these arteries, Roberts wasn't just stealing, he was crippling the economic systems that sustained the colonial powers. In doing so, he transformed piracy from a pursuit of personal wealth into a global disruption. Roberts understood that the most effective way to challenge the European empires was not through brute force, but by hitting them where it hurt most, at the very core of their wealth. But Roberts' strategic genius didn't stop at attacking the most valuable trade routes. He also built a sophisticated intelligence network that allowed him to stay one step ahead of his enemies. While many pirates relied on chance to find ships to raid, Roberts built a system of spies and informants that kept him informed about the movements of the most valuable targets. This network allowed Roberts to plan his raids with precision, striking at the perfect moment. His intelligence network, combined with his logistical brilliance, made him nearly untouchable. Even when European powers tried to coordinate efforts to capture him, Roberts was always one step ahead, able to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies. The scale and sophistication of Roberts's operation were unmatched. He didn't just steal treasure, he built a pirate empire that could rival the great colonial powers. But Roberts also understood the value of alliances. Unlike many pirates who worked alone or in loose alliances, Roberts forged strong relationships with local rulers in the regions where he operated. These alliances were crucial to his success. In places like Madagascar, Roberts struck deals with African rulers to ensure that his fleet had access to safe ports, supplies, and protection from European forces. These alliances not only provided Roberts with the resources he needed to sustain his fleet, but they also allowed him to operate independently from the European powers. The relationships Roberts built with these local rulers were key to his ability to maintain his operations over a long period of time. Roberts wasn't just a pirate king. He was a visionary who understood that to build a lasting empire, he needed to create a sustainable infrastructure. He built a network of safe havens and supply bases that allowed his fleet to operate without returning to European ports. His fleet became a self-sustaining entity, able to operate far from land for months at a time. This logistical advantage allowed Roberts to strike at will, taking the fight to the very heart of the global trade system. But Roberts' empire wasn't just about logistics and strategy, it was also about leadership. While many pirate captains ruled through fear and intimidation, Roberts governed with respect. He implemented a pirate code that ensured that every member of his crew had a voice and a say in the decisions that were made. This sense of equality and fairness created a sense of unity and loyalty within his crew. Pirates under Roberts didn't just fight for treasure, they fought for a shared purpose, for the idea that they were part of something larger than themselves. This sense of camaraderie and unity was one of the key reasons that Robert's fleet was so successful. Despite the many challenges Roberts faced both from his enemies and from the harsh realities of life on the high seas, he never wavered in his determination to build his pirate empire. He faced overwhelming odds, including the combined forces of the British, French, and Spanish navies, yet he continued to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast his enemies. Roberts never backed down, and it was this unshakable resolve that made him one of the most formidable pirate leaders in history. The legacy of Bartholomew Roberts is one that transcends piracy itself. He was not just a pirate king, he was a visionary, a strategist, and a leader whose ideas reshaped the world of piracy. His ability to build a self-sustaining fleet, his mastery of logistics and intelligence, and his revolutionary approach to leadership made him a figure who changed the course of history. While his empire may have eventually fallen, the story of Bartholomew Roberts remains one of the most compelling examples of how vision, leadership, and strategy can alter the course of history. Bartholomew Roberts' legacy, though ultimately short-lived in terms of his reign over the seas, has had a lasting impact on how we view the role of pirates in history. Roberts' story goes far beyond the standard pirate tales of treasure chests filled with gold and jewels. It's about a man who redefined what it meant to be a pirate, turning the lawless chaos of his peers into a model of strategic warfare. He wasn't interested in simply living out a life of crime. He had a grand vision that reshaped piracy into a sophisticated enterprise capable of rivaling the might of the European colonial powers. Roberts' brilliance came not just from his ability to navigate the seas, but from his deep understanding of how power dynamics worked. At the core of his approach was his ability to capitalize on the trade routes, recognizing them not as mere arteries for transporting goods, but as the very lifeblood of empire. These trade routes represented power and wealth, and Roberts understood that to take on the global powers, especially the British, French, and Spanish empires, he had to sever these lifelines. What Roberts accomplished was revolutionary for his time. Whereas many pirates acted sporadically, targeting ships based on chance or simply seeking treasure, Roberts crafted a strategic empire that understood both the art of war and the intricacies of economics. His fleet wasn't a group of opportunists. It was a force united by a shared purpose, and under his leadership, piracy became more than a simple act of theft. It became an attack on the very foundation of the global economic order. One of Roberts's most profound contributions to piracy was his ability to maintain a fleet that could operate independently of European ports. In an era when most pirate ships had to constantly resupply, often returning to ports where European forces might capture them, Roberts implemented a system that allowed his fleet to remain at sea for extended periods without returning to port. His ships were well stocked, and he ensured that his fleet was self-sustaining, with provisions and ammunition carefully managed to ensure the success of long-term campaigns. This logistical innovation was what allowed Roberts to strike unpredictably, targeting vital merchant ships and trade routes at any given time, and his operations spanned from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean. Unlike many pirates, Roberts wasn't content with attacking ships based on sheer luck. He operated with precision, taking the time to gather intelligence, observe the movement of his targets, and then execute his plans at just the right moment. It wasn't just about brute force, it was about intelligence, foresight, and execution. Roberts was also a master at leveraging his position to strike alliances with local powers. This was particularly crucial in regions where he could not exert control through military force alone. His alliance with the rulers of Madagascar, for example, allowed him to establish a base of operations from which his fleet could operate with relative impunity. By working with local rulers, Roberts ensured that his operations were both sustainable and shielded from the ever-watchful eyes of European navies. These alliances were not simply about trade, but also about ensuring his fleet had the resources and protection it needed to maintain its momentum. They gave Roberts the strategic advantage of operating in areas that were largely inaccessible to European forces, allowing him to expand his empire further, without fear of retaliation. Roberts's diplomatic approach, which was a departure from the more typical pirate tactic of relying solely on violence, played a key role in his success. He recognized that to truly challenge the might of the European colonial powers, he needed more than just a fleet. He needed to create a lasting infrastructure, one that would allow piracy to flourish beyond the usual cycle of raiding and resupply. By negotiating these alliances, Roberts ensured the longevity of his operations, creating a sustainable pirate kingdom that was difficult to dislodge. Perhaps the most important aspect of Roberts' success was his leadership style. Unlike many pirate captains who ruled through fear and intimidation, Roberts built his empire based on respect and fairness. He implemented a pirate code that guaranteed a sense of equality and fairness among his crew, which helped maintain discipline and loyalty. This pirate code wasn't just about dividing spoils or ensuring a smooth operation. It created a culture of unity and collaboration among his crew. Every pirate on Roberts's ship had a say in decisions that affected the whole, ensuring that they were invested in the success of the mission. This sense of ownership, of shared responsibility, made Roberts' fleet stronger and more cohesive than any other pirate force in history. Moreover, Roberts wasn't simply a captain who led from the front. He inspired his crew to believe in something larger than just their personal fortunes. They weren't just fighting for treasure. They were fighting to dismantle an established global system that subjugated the very people they once were. In that sense, Roberts's leadership wasn't just about building an empire. It was about challenging the status quo, about proving that even the most marginalized and oppressed could create something powerful and lasting. His fleet wasn't just a group of outlaws. It was a movement, a collective effort to alter the balance of power and bring about a new world order, even if that meant operating outside the law. Despite Roberts' remarkable success, his reign as a pirate king didn't last forever. The European powers, now fully aware of the threat he posed, worked relentlessly to eliminate him. The British, French, and Spanish navies pursued him with all their might, but Roberts' ability to evade capture and outsmart his pursuers was unmatched. It was this relentless ingenuity, his ability to adapt and outmaneuver his enemies, that made Roberts such a formidable figure. The European powers underestimated him, believing that their superior military might would eventually overpower him, but they could never quite catch up to Roberts's ever-evolving strategies. His death at the hands of the British Navy may have marked the end of his pirate empire, but his legacy continues to resonate through history. Roberts wasn't just a pirate who lived for wealth or adventure. He was a visionary who sought to disrupt the global order. Through his vision, his intelligence, and his ability to inspire and unite his crew, Roberts was able to transform piracy into a well-oiled enterprise that shook the foundations of the colonial powers. In the end, Roberts' legacy wasn't just about treasure. It was about proving that even the most unlikely individuals could challenge the greatest powers of their time. His empire may have fallen, but his impact on the world of piracy, on the global trade systems, and on the very idea of rebellion against imperial rule remains a lasting symbol of what one individual, with vision and strategy, can accomplish. His story, though often overlooked in the grand narrative of piracy, continues to be one of the most compelling and inspiring chapters in the history of the high seas.